By the early 1970s, the Vietnam War had entered its final, grueling stages. The jungles that once echoed with the sounds of battle were now scarred landscapes, littered with the remnants of years of relentless warfare. Yet beneath that shattered surface, the Viet Cong's tunnels, the hidden arteries of their resistance, still pulsed with life. For years, these underground networks had outlasted bombs, bulldozers, and gas attacks. But as American forces began their withdrawal and the South Vietnamese army took over much of the fighting, the era of the tunnels was nearing its end. What had once been the heart of guerrilla strategy was now becoming a fading shadow of its former power. Still, for the soldiers who fought above and below, the memory of those tunnels remained a symbol of endurance and of terror. The United States had thrown everything at them: explosives to collapse their entrances, water and tear gas to flood them, and massive B-52 airstrikes that turned the jungle into a cratered wasteland. Yet somehow, the tunnels persisted. In places like Siu Kai and Ben Cat, engineers reported finding freshly dug passages even after weeks of bombardment. The Viet Cong rebuilt in silence, working by candlelight, carrying soil away in baskets, and reconstructing the veins of their underground world. But by 1972, the balance of the war had shifted. The North Vietnamese army was taking over most major operations, relying less on the guerrilla networks that had once defined the conflict. The tunnels, while still formidable, began to lose their strategic importance. Many were abandoned or collapsed intentionally to prevent discovery. The men and women who had lived for years underground emerged into a country that had been transformed by devastation and loss. The war above ground had caught up with the world below. American troops who once feared the tunnels now approached them as relics, silent witnesses of a war fought in the shadows. Engineers mapped them, historians documented them, and demolition teams sealed them one by one. But even as the physical tunnels disappeared, their psychological presence endured. Veterans spoke of the claustrophobia, the darkness, the whispers that haunted their dreams. They remembered crawling through airless corridors, hearing the muffled breathing of unseen enemies, and realizing that the earth itself could be both enemy and shield. For the Viet Cong, the tunnels were more than military structures; they were proof that determination could triumph against overwhelming odds. Even when their underground world began to crumble, the spirit that had built it refused to die. After the war's end in 1975, when Saigon fell and Vietnam was reunified, the remnants of these tunnels became a part of the nation's living memory. At Siu Kai, entire sections were preserved as historical monuments, allowing future generations to walk through the narrow chambers where soldiers once lived and fought. Tourists would later crawl through widened tunnels, amazed at how people could have survived in such conditions. But for those who had been there, the tunnel rats, the guerrilla fighters, and the soldiers on both sides, the memories were far from an attraction. They were echoes of survival, sacrifice, and fear. The tunnels had played their part in reshaping modern warfare, proving that a smaller, determined force could defy a technologically superior army by mastering the terrain and the element of invisibility. They had turned the earth itself into a weapon, forcing the United States to fight a kind of war it had never imagined.